Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and 6 days ago, Microsoft Internet Explorer finally died. Now you might be like, whoa Muda, you got a little video coming out a little later than I expected. And you know what, I had to take time to really sit down and basically give you the overall story. It's one thing talking about the death of Internet Explorer, but do you know how big it is? As a computer nerd, as a nerd involved in this world, I wanted to take this time to not just give a eulogy to Microsoft Internet Explorer, but take you through a little bit of history. Now for those of you who are a little too young to know what Microsoft Internet Explorer is, way back in the day, this was the de facto browser that everyone of my age was using. That's because Microsoft owns Windows. And for those of you who don't know, Windows is the most used desktop operating system in the entire world. More people use Windows than they use Mac OS, and way more than they use Linux or FreeBSD or any other operating system under the sun. Windows is here and it'll always be here to stay. As long as graphic technologies, games, software, a lot of it is built primarily for Windows, nothing else is really going to come in to sort of move it away. Okay, Windows is also really popular in the world of the corporate environment, governments. So of course, in some cases, it's going to be here to stay. Now, of course, that's a whole separate topic on its own. Because Microsoft owns Windows and also owns Internet Explorer, what do you think they bundled together back in the day? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, when you installed Windows, you got the venereal disease that is also known as Internet Explorer. In the original days of the browser war, if you will, Microsoft Internet Explorer was basically coming in 1996 as a little-known guy, standing next to the massive behemoth that was known as Netscape Navigator. And, of course, other devices as well, too, not really that important. But, of course, as Microsoft's dominance grew, their dominance in the Internet Explorer space grew so massively that they became one of the most de facto browsers ever. And of course, Microsoft was the, target of a bunch of antitrust lawsuits at this time. For instance, at some point during Microsoft Corp versus United States, way back in 2001, ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiffs alleged that Microsoft had abused monopoly power on Intel-based personal computers in its handling of operating systems and web browser integration. The issue central to the case was whether Microsoft was allowed to bundle its flagship Internet Explorer web browser software with its Windows operating system. Bundling them is alleged to have been responsible for Microsoft's victory in the browser wars, as every Windows user had a copy of Internet Explorer. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, back in the day, if you were a web browsing company and you wanted to go up against Microsoft Internet Explorer, it was probably easier for you to discover another dimension untouched by man, simply because going up against big evil Microsoft was a loser's game. You were never going to win. It was always a losing case. And even when the United States government jumped in and sort of put a leash on Microsoft, it was too little too late, because by that point, the entire competition was already smoldering. Okay, it was done. It was dead. Now, in a lot of cases, you can actually use Internet Explorer today. For instance, I just made a Windows Vista virtual machine. And you know what? Before we continue, I'm just going to state for the record, I think Windows Vista is awesome. And if you don't agree with me, well, we have to agree to disagree. Okay, I like this operating system. It is what it is. But this operating system was one of the last few times that it came bundled with Internet Explorer. So over here, it takes us to Internet Explorer. And if you actually look at the version history for this, this is Internet Explorer 7. It's actually quite more recent than when Microsoft was at the peak, right? This is 7.0, 6000, 16.386. Can you still browse the internet today? Absolutely. You can type in my channel, for instance, Some Ordinary Gamers, and you can actually find that they have some pretty interesting photos. I'm actually still connected to Google. Google will function on something this old because Google has a lot of, I would say, what are we going to talk about? Backwards compatibility towards this kind of stuff. Of course, you can see Google is a little limited. I can only see videos, images, and news. For instance, if I see images of myself, you can absolutely spot them. If I look at videos of my channel, I can actually go to youtube.com. I can continue to the website. And unfortunately, because YouTube requires something a little more recent, it's probably going to tell me, hey dumbass, can you please use a browser that's actually more well-known? In fact, I don't even think it's loading anything, just display the blocked content. Of course, super old sites like milk.com, established 1994, work just fine. Does the universe exist? Apparently. And of course, these are websites that you can dig up right now. A lot of the older websites that haven't been updated work just fine under old Internet Explorer. Anything new? Good luck with that. In fact, this operating system alone, unfortunately isn't even supported by most of the updated browsers these days, okay? So if you try to install Firefox, I think the newest version onto this, it ain't gonna work. And if you try to install Chrome, I don't think it's gonna work on Vista 32-bit like I have. I also have Netscape Navigator, which died to Internet Explorer back in the day, but as you can imagine, this doesn't connect at all, okay? It actually is a very, very, very buggy browser. Of course, if you ever wanted to see a whole browser map, here it is, right here, ladies and gentlemen. You can see a whole bunch of browsers established back in 1990, and some of them have survived all the way up to 2022. But of course, browser technology started to converge. So as somebody in South Korea puts up the Internet Explorer gravestone, yes, this is actually real. He was a good tool to... Oh, that is so true. Yes. Now, to understand what happened during the first browser war was Microsoft actually won. Microsoft completely won the first war. They had the highest market share, and basically they decided to sit on their laurels. Now, at this point, this sparked what was known as the second browser war. Now, in nerd terms, I know this is getting really nerdy, okay, but trust me, it gets good. When the second browser war happened, effectively what it started to form was, as Microsoft was sitting back doing nothing at all, people realized, actually not realized, people knew Internet Explorer sucked. It was covered with bugs. It was covered with security issues. It basically never even supported Linux. And I think it at some point abandoned Mac users for some reason. And of course, Microsoft didn't realize that, hey guys, at some point people are going to be watching things on their mobile devices. Did not care whatsoever. So at this point, because Microsoft was complacent, effectively a bunch of other people in the Silicon Valley tech game worked together and started the second war. They launched an attack, if you will, a three-pronged attack. Apple, for instance, developed WebKit, which they got from KDE, which then later became the basis for Chromium and Google Chrome as we know today. Mozilla Firefox basically took the dying code from Netscape and decided to create Project Phoenix, where they would rise from the ashes, rebuild Firefox, and lead into a promised world of web browsing. You also had groups like the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group that sought to create updated versions of HTML, new internet technologies that would actually better the internet rather than whatever Microsoft wanted. But then what happened was 2008. 2008, Google Chrome stepped in, and Google wasn't fucking around. Google actually wanted to create a new browser where they could have more than just static web pages like milk.com, no offense. They wanted true cross-platform engines. They wanted to turn the entire world not just web page, but web-based applications, which is something Microsoft never even dreamed of. Of course, as you can imagine, all these rapid advancements in technologies, Google, Apple, Firefox, all of these massive groups getting together ultimately spelled the death knell for Microsoft Internet Explorer. Now, Microsoft Internet Explorer has been dead for a long time, and in fact, this recent news wasn't going to affect anyone, because less than 0.4% of people ever even used Internet Explorer even recently. In fact, the only people that I know are actually worried are governmental groups, specifically those in Japan, who are right now going, oh god, what are we going to do? They got rid of Internet Explorer. How are our old asses going to send shit to the fax machine? Yes, in some parts of Japan, governmental organizations, financial organizations, did in fact use Microsoft Internet Explorer, which absolutely scares the piss out of me. Even Microsoft's head of cybersecurity, Chris Jackson, at some point told you, hey, if you're still using Internet Explorer in the year 2019, you might want to be careful. We only kept it in there for people to test old school websites. If you're still using this shit, understand it's not really supported. And what he means not really supported is that Microsoft Internet Explorer was prone to so many security bugs, so many security exploits, that using it on the internet was basically trying to fuck $20 ass without any form of protection. Not an ideal situation, not a good thing, definitely not healthy. He was a little bit more kinder than my terminology, but I think the point still stands. Be careful. Update your web browsers. I made a whole video on browser exploitation. Keep an updated browser, okay? All right, if you don't have an updated browser, you're susceptible to exploitation on the internet, okay? Simple as that, all right? Basic computer advice. Of course, this all didn't just end out of nowhere. Microsoft is still in the browser game. They actually made something known as Microsoft Edge back in the year 2015. For those of you who don't know what Microsoft Edge is, it was basically Microsoft's rebranding onto Internet Explorer. They wanted to get rid of the name Internet Explorer entirely because Lo and behold, it had a bad connotation attached to it, okay? Microsoft Edge was basically Microsoft's next generation web browser. This is where they use something known as Edge HTML, which is Microsoft's own proprietary browsing engine that was in fact built all the way off MS HTML, which was the Trident engine of Internet Explorer, which, for those of you who don't know, was introduced back in the days of Internet Explorer 4, all the way back in 1997. So yes, this did in fact bring Microsoft's technology into the modern age. But again, because it failed and they didn't, sort of consort to a lot of the the web layouts of today, the web regulations, Microsoft decided, you know what, forget all of it. Let's just switch to Chromium. Yes, Edge at this point is actually a better version of Google Chrome. Don't believe me? Look at Chromium. Chromium is an open source browser which basically forks into a bunch of very popular browsers. Google Chrome is based off of Chromium. Edge is based off of Chromium. Some of my favorite browsers that I used to use, such as Brave browser, is actually based off of Chromium. You can actually get Edge, which is Chromium based right now, and it actually comes as part of Windows 10 and Windows 11. And in fact, it's actually quite good. Firing it up, it's the exact same experience you would expect from Google Chrome anyways, just in a much less bloated design. On a personal level, I like Edge, okay? Edge for me works because it consumes way less resources, RAM, than I would ever see Google Chrome consume, right? Edge is a lot better in terms of optimizing that aspect. It has a bunch of extra support, and actually, compared to Google, it actually has better privacy support than Google's Chrome browser. So yes, if you wanted to use a better version of Chrome, this is it. All right. In my experience, I like Microsoft Edge way more than Google Chrome. And anytime I see somebody downloading Google Chrome with Edge, you're literally downloading Chromium with Chromium. You're downloading inferior Chromium with better Chromium. What's wrong with you? And you know what? Before anybody's like, oh, how much do they pay for you to say that? Anytime I give a W to Microsoft, it takes years off of my life. I am literally in pain congratulating Microsoft, but I'm only doing it because it's straight facts. Even when you compare it to privacy features of tomorrow, the internet is changing. Google themselves actually want to implement something known as Flock, which I don't know how far we're getting into this, but Flock is basically Google's new privacy sandbox, which is a bit scary. According to the EFF right now, who have their own things to say, Flock, which is Federated Learning of Cohorts, is Google's way of creating a privacy sandbox, which is trying to basically eliminate the days of third-party cookies, which are some of the worst shit that we've ever had on the internet, but replacing it with a system of profiling that may just be as insidious. Now, of course, that's a whole different story right there. I wanted to make this video to really show you the death of Internet Explorer. And to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen, it's a wild ride indeed. The era of browser wars, which who knows when the third browser war happens, right? But the era of browser wars is an interesting topic indeed, and Internet Explorer had an important role in it. But Internet Explorer had a massive role in Microsoft's company ethos, if you will, too. Whereas before, they were all about the proprietary, all about locking you down to a framework. Now, Microsoft of today is actually a bit more open than they've ever been. Embracing open source technologies, being part of the solution rather than the problem. And in some respects, you have to really give Internet Explorer and the death of it some actual credit. Because I think it was really that point that shifted Microsoft's entire, ethos as a company. In order to survive, they had to be part of the herd rather than close their ears, close their eyes, and basically pretend that they were living in the utopia that they thought they were living in, they thought that they had forged. They now have to actually work with everyone else. So again, it's a rather interesting case, and Internet Explorer was an awesome time. I definitely grew up with it. I was on Newgrounds all the time with it. And I remember making the switch to Furryfox, to Google Chrome, and detaching myself, decoupling from the Internet Explorer bandwagon. And of course, to see it dead now reminds me how old I actually am. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a wild video indeed. I'm glad you stuck all the way to the end. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am